Hello, I'm Mike. Thank you for joining me. I've got a lot less voice than I normally have. It's Thursday, the 13th of May, and we're looking at 1 Corinthians 14:20 to 35. Okay, the main bulk of this passage is looking about contribution of tongues and prophecy in meetings. And at the very end, it mentions about women in meetings. And I'm going to start off with the last bit, where it talks about women keeping silent in churches. I think it was very interesting what John Harding said the other week on May the 5th in his devotional talk, when he was talking about 1 Corinthians 11:5, where Paul writes about women praying and prophesying in church, but doing so with head covering. He clearly allowed that. And so that's kind of interesting to put in the light of what it says in verse 34 here. So Paul clearly did allow women to pray and prophesy, within the cultural sort of context, wearing head coverings. And on a wider note of women remaining silent in meetings, obviously that was something, as John mentioned in what he said on May the 5th, that was very particular to the cultural context where women were simply not educated at all. They wouldn't have had the knowledge of the scriptures that men would have had, and hence what Paul says in this passage. However, moving on from that to the main bulk of this passage, which is about tongues and prophecy in church. Basically, Paul is trying to ensure that there's order in church gatherings, and clearly in Corinth, the church was lots of gifts of the Spirit, very gifted in that sense, but also very immature. And that can be a real recipe for things going completely haywire. So clearly he was wanting to maintain a sense of order. And without picking out on specific things from this passage, I just want to say something from my own personal experience as somebody who over many years has often in church services felt stirred to bring prophetic contributions. I have really learned over the years to really appreciate the system we've had in Frontline of a gate whereby there's somebody at the front, one of the leaders, or somebody who was leaving the meeting, who we check with first of all if it's appropriate to bring a message or a contribution or not. Excuse me. Now, over the years, that has been a real benefit and blessing to me. It's really been a real discipling thing. It's sharpened my discernment when I've got something that is really right for that moment. It's also helped to erode my tendency towards preoccupation with me and my contribution. And desire to be noticed and all that sort of thing. It's helped to erode the flesh, if you like. But also, when I am given the okay to contribute something, when I have got a voice, it has meant that when I brought something, knowing that it has been given the okay, as it were, by those leading the meeting, it's enabled me to bring it with a greater confidence and an authority, knowing that I'm speaking under authority in that context. So I just want to say a big thank you to the people over the years, whether they be Dave and Julie, Nick and Jenny, Tom, Sally, John Harding, Matt Evans and others who've been on the gate all those times, who've often said no, not at the moment, no, not quite right, but who've also said yes. I just want to thank those people for what has been, really helpful to me over the years in a discipling process. And, and just the blessing is to be able to be under authority in that sense. And I just want to leave us with a final thought, which is a verse that kind of just jumps out at me from this passage. It's verse 33. For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. And I don't know how you're feeling this morning, but it often occurs to me that a real strategy of the enemy is to show confusion in our minds, etc. And I don't know, what you're facing today, but I just want to speak over us, speak over myself, speak over you, that blessing that may you know today the God who is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace. And where there is any confusion in your heart, in your mind, may you know the blessing of his peace dispelling that confusion today. In Jesus' name. Thanks for joining me.